Welcome to the Lend Academy podcast, session number 28. This is your host, Peter Renton, founder of Lend Academy. Today on the show, I am delighted to welcome Matt Burton. He is the co-founder and CEO of Orchard Platform. Now, I've known Matt for quite some time. We actually met at, I believe it was the very first peer-to-peer lending meetup that he hosted in New York. It was early 2013, and I think there was about 12 of us there. It was all the early adopters, and it was we had a great evening. Now meetups, they get 200 people coming or thereabouts. It's grown tremendously since that time. But got to know Matt and Angela as well, one of his co-founders, and we invited them along to the Lend It conference in June of 2013 where they presented. And since then have really followed with great interest the work that Orchard is doing, and how they've really been able to help facilitate and create an ecosystem for this industry, something that I think is really important. So I wanted to get Matt on the show to talk about what he's been doing at Orchard, what he sees for the future, and his thoughts on the industry today. So I hope you enjoy the show. Well, welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's just get started. For those who don't know your story, can you give a little bit of background about yourself and how you came to peer-to-peer lending?
Sure. So I found Lending Club in 2011, and then shortly after I found Prosper. And the story is interesting going into it. I was actually at a startup that was in the process of selling to Google in the advertising technology space. And as part of the acquisition process, we actually had to go through a Department of Justice antitrust review. And when they were looking at potential, issues with that IPO, they started interviewing a lot of people internally. And it turns out that I ended up getting flagged. So I spent kind of 5 months of my life just dealing with lawyers, and
that must have been fun.
It's I would wish it upon no one. Right. And I obviously had a lot of free time during this period where I couldn't really do any work. And I found Lending Club, and I was just amazed at what they were doing, and there was a ton of parallels between what I had seen happen in the online advertising market as it had scaled up and matured, and Lending Club was very much at an early stage of selling loans online in a similar way that ads had been sold online. And so, through that interest, I ended up doing a ton of research. The more research I did, the more excited I got, and ended up investing just like you as a retail investor. And then kind of that fall of 2011, the acquisition closed and I became a Google employee, and kind of that's a story for another time. But kind of the next, 9 months of my life, I was super busy. And then, really reconnected when I was introduced that following summer to Angela Thresney, who's one of my co-founders at Orchard. And she was kind of the first person I had met who was also invested in Lending Club and Prosper loans. And her background at American Express and Citibank kind of opened my eyes to what you could do on the modeling side. And was really interested in understanding why she was interested in the space, given that she was definitely an expert. And just hearing the stories around how difficult it was to work at both American Express and Citibank and deal with their internal systems, I realized that what Lending Club and Prosper doing was really special, and they didn't have any of those legacy tech issues, and we're really building kind of the next generation of lending software from scratch, and that was super exciting.
Mm-hmm. So when did the sort of idea for a business start to germinate? Was that in your initial conversation with Angela, or when did you think that, okay, there's actually a business to be made here?
So, when we were having that conversation, and even, the months afterwards, where she kind of, I basically spent the summer getting, a credit 101 course.
Right.
It was still very focused on being retail investors in this space. And it was only, later on, once we ended up starting to connect with more people in the space and realized that there was similar challenges in, placing orders on Lending Club and tracking how progress was going. And, we just realized that as the space scaled and really became a real asset class, that, there was going to be a lot of, needs that were currently unmet. And then, for us, the Lendit conference, kind of May of 2013, was really where we saw kind of the first institutional investor interest in the space. And ended up consulting for some institutional investors, which really working with them was when we realized that their needs were just radically different than a retail investor. That as good consultants, we went out and tried to find a good market solution for them to help them with their operations and accounting teams. And when we didn't find any solutions out there, we thought really hard about, maybe we should just fill in this gap here. This, it was a good problem for our backgrounds, and it made a lot of sense.
Okay, so I know, like, we had you and Angela present at that first Lender conference, and then I know that that was where you kind of you made that change. So what was the specific problems that the institutional investors that came to you at that conference, what were they specifically trying to address?
So in working with them, it became clear that the investment committees were actually really supportive of the space. They really liked the asset class, and believed it was a great opportunity. But as you continued on and you were talking with the operation and accounting groups, as soon as they realized that, the investment committee wanted to buy $50 million of $8,000 loans, a terrified look appeared on their face. Mm-hmm. And so, they were just super concerned about the fact that none of the systems that they were currently using to account and keep track of were going to work in this new space. And so it was really that need, right? How do we make sure that the internal teams feel comfortable enough to sign off on this? And then also, as they scale their investing in the space, they're not scaling people. Right, that was the big concern. Is that okay, if we invest $50 million, is it going to take a team of 6 people to keep track of it? And then if we scale from 50 to 200, is that going to take my operations team dedicated to this from 6 to 40? And then when you did the math on that, you realized that it didn't make sense. You couldn't just throw bodies at this problem because it wouldn't work. And given that I have a technology background, I was really searching and knew that a lot of these things could be solved, through building scalable tech.
Right. Okay. So let's just step back for a second and explain exactly what Orchard does today. What are the services you provide? I know you've got sort of two sides to your business. You've got the investors and you've got the platforms. So can you just take us through each side of the business and exactly what your company does?
Sure. So I'll start on the investor side. So a majority of the clients that we have today, we ended up finding through personal referrals, and basically they had found the space in some fashion, and we're going through and figuring out what were all the components that they needed to invest. And you need a custodian in the space, and you need a fund admin, and you need, a valuation provider. And one of the things that they needed was a back office solution. And so that's really the piece of the value chain that we were providing. And, back office kind of has 2 components. It has one, an order management system so that you can host your investment strategy and credit model and actually be able to place orders through your account on Lending Club and Prosper and Funding Circle and OnDeck and Cabbage and anyone that you're connected to. And then the second piece was after you've bought those loans, how do you keep track of them? And so that is one piece was a lot of customized reporting and analytics. It was very specific to each client that we generate every day and either, upload to an FTP server or send via email. And it was just kind of keeping track of that and allowing the operations and accounting teams to get exactly what they need on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And then, over time that we started sending data to various partners in the space as well that helped kind of automate and make their lives easier, whether that be the custodian or leverage provider or fund admin. so that, everybody was getting the data when they needed it, on the schedule they needed it, in the format that they needed it, which was not a trivial problem.
No, for sure. Okay, so then what about for the platforms themselves? Obviously, the platforms aren't really your paying clients, but you obviously have a side of the business. Or is there a part of it where you do provide a paid solution for them? Just go through all that piece.
Yeah. So today, our clients are the institutional investors. As the space has scaled up, we have been asked by a lot of originators to help out on various pieces of their business. And so one of the places that we decided that, our backgrounds in technology could play a positive role was around the due diligence process. So today we had an announcement that we launched for what I can tell is the first ever originator database. And so we have a database of all the originators who are selling loans to institutional investors, and it has information on the types of loans, the yields, all the characteristics around it, and it's searchable for qualified investors who have signed an NDA with us, and that's just to kind of help streamline the process of understanding the opportunities within the space. And at the end of the day, we're really focused on increasing the velocity of capital and then the diversification of that capital within the space. Mm-hmm. And so this was a pretty obvious win to help the industry.
Sure. So how many platforms are in that database today that you're making available to your clients?
The number's been going up pretty quickly over the past couple of days as we announced it, but I think the last count there was 26 platforms in there, and then there's kind of another 5 to 10 who are in various processes of filling it out.
Right, and so of that 26, how many do you directly connect to, so that the investor says, "Oh, I like these 4." Do you connect with all 26, or is there a subset of that you connect with through an API?
Yeah, so it's definitely a subset. So today we're connected, to our clients are buying on 6 platforms today. It looks like the 7th will happen in the next couple of weeks here. And, the originator database is just to start those conversations, mm-hmm. and streamline the due diligence. So hopefully, we'll be working with a majority of the 26. I mean, my goal for the originator database is that we're starting out with 26, but, over time we can continue to add, all the various asset classes and opportunities and have, 100 originators in the database.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you're tracking a lot more than that. I mean, we're tracking over 200. I'm sure you're tracking something similar to that, where as far as if you start talking globally and start talking across asset classes, it seems like there's a lot to keep track of.
Exactly, and the space is expanding so quickly. I mean, not within the verticals that we talk about a lot, but just I imagine you hear from them as well. But there's a lot of people in the equipment leasing and factoring and other verticals that are really taking a hard look. And I think what Lending Club has been, we have to pat them on the back, is that they did an amazing job of validating the marketplace model. And so now, there's a lot of other originators saying like, wow, that's really impressive what they've been able to do. Maybe we should take a harder look at that model. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So just wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about your fundraising. So, you raised, it was like just a year ago. It feels like longer than that, but it was just a year ago that you guys raised your first angel round. And then, a few weeks back, you raised, $12 million in a Series A, and you've had some pretty big names in both of those rounds. So I'm just curious, firstly, just to talk, people like Vikram Pandit, the former CEO of Citi. I mean, you got John Mack, Morgan Stanley, who obviously has a Lending Club connection. I mean, how did you get on the radar? How does Orchard get on the radar of these kinds of people?
I think most of my interactions with them were actually where they reached out to me or were introduced to me because they were interested in connecting. Because, for a lot of people who have been watching the space for a number of years, this is having a progression of similar industries. And Bill Ullman, who's on the Orchard team, just wrote a great blog post on this, comparing it to, the online brokers. Mm-hmm. And, then seeing the story evolve, right? And, you normally start out with some, trailblazers who are kind of out there by themselves building up, a brand new industry. But then as they get larger and larger and scale gets, higher and higher, then the second phase, there's a new chapter for infrastructure type companies that are helping support that scale. And I think that, their involvement and interest is really just a validation of the space that, this space still has a long way to grow. And that, now we're kind of moving into a place where the ecosystem is so strong, it can actually support companies like Orchard, who are looking to, to really grow it, and I hope the whole space grows to, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Sure. We both do. So what are you going to use? You raised $12 million. Obviously you're probably going to be hiring people, but what specifically have you earmarked for that money for the coming year?
Yeah, so we've accelerated our hiring plan, and we've already seen that happen. I mean, we're up to 22 people here in New York now, and that will continue to be a huge focus of ours, making sure that we're hiring people with the right skill set and the right cultural fit to Orchard. I think that a big focus for us is not only expanding to new asset classes and building the connection points that make sense there, but also going internationally. And so, we've spent a lot of time and had a big presence at Lend It Europe and at the AltFi Global conference here in New York, and have a lot of conversations going on with European investors who we work with today, who are buying U.S. based loans. But I think the next chapter is there's going to be a lot of buying of European whole loans on the platforms, and we see this trend as being a global one and not one that's isolated into any specific country. And so if we want to provide our services, we're going to have to have a global view.
Right. So, and we've talked before. I mean, it sounds like you're intending to open a London office in 2015. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So we're looking at various locations. I mean, I think that the most obvious place is London, for a number of reasons. And, I'm planning on spending a lot of time on an airplane next year. Right. So are you as part of the deal then? So you open up a London office, and then you've got UK institutional investors. Is your goal then like connecting potentially UK institutional investors with UK platforms and as well as US platforms, so you can kind of be a one-stop shop for their global investments? Is that the plan? Yeah, we see ourselves as supporting investors who want to invest globally, and so we're not going to be geographically limited in that regard.
Right. Okay. So I want to talk about something that you've mentioned many, many times, and that's the secondary market. Now, I think you publicly stated at the beginning of this year that your goal was to create a secondary market by the end of this year. And, we're nearing that right now. And it probably was a little bit audacious, that goal, but can you just give us an update of where Orchard is at with creating a secondary market for whole loans?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that at the beginning of the year, it looked like there was a clear path, and just to be totally transparent, it's not a general secondary market for anyone. It would be only whole loans and only for institutional investors, which are our clients in focus. And I think that a lot of the core is built out on the being able to do price discovery and matching. Similar ways that we operate in the primary markets are applicable in secondary. I think that where there still needs to be a lot of work to be done is to really figure out how clearing and settlement and the change of cash flows happens. Because if you talk to most of the top platforms today, I mean, at their growth rates, they're always resource constrained. And so trying to pull resources away for a new project is very difficult to do. And so, the reality of it is, that we require full participation of originators who actually want to support that.
Yep.
And so, we're at the mercy of them having resources to be able to help build the systems that would need to be in place. And so, I think that it will get done. I think that there's definitely interest for it. But like a lot of things in the startup world, they sometimes take longer than you expect.
Right. So you're what you're saying, I just want to be clear on this. You're creating a secondary market that will be a closed market. It will only be for Orchard clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it will only be for institutional investors who have signed up for Orchard.
Okay.
We need some agreement in place with them.
Right.
And there's, we're actually open to as well to other agreements where, the originator would actually license the software from us and then they would run it. That's fine as well.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's just the goal is being able to provide, institutional investors with liquidity, right? I think it's just
right.
after the last, financial crisis, liquidity is an important topic to a lot of investors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. And then, I feel like we've talked many times about when are we going to see a closed-end fund or even a 40 Act a mutual fund in this space. And, whenever you talk about that, the first question that comes up, well, we've got to have liquidity. And I know, there are companies that are working on that, but, I feel like this asset class is not going to become mainstream until you can go to Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard and take out your marketplace lending account and fund it with loans. And you're not going to get that without a secondary market. So based on that, I mean, it sounds like it's not imminent. Are you prepared to say there'll be something launched in 2015 or is that even still up in the air? I mean, obviously you're at the mercy of the platform to some extent, but what's your sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first ones will be launched in 2015. I think that it's just, it took us, we were pretty much working all year just to get the first two platforms live, right? Just to be able to support Lending Club and Prosper was a huge amount of work. But now we're at a point where, we can onboard a new originator in a pretty streamlined process that we feel really confident about and are really starting to get that streamlined. And I think that that's going to free up, a lot of resources on our end to work on the secondary market now that we have that done. And I think that as we work with more and more originators, right, then there's more and more options for who actually is the first one to launch.
Sure,
right?
Exactly. Once you get one, that's gonna get the ball rolling.
Exactly. I think we're focused on just, making the first one work and making it foolproof so that everybody can trust it.
Right. Because that's the thing. I mean, I feel like I just don't see how the platforms aren't behind this more. I mean, I feel like, obviously they've got a lot of investor interest. So it's not like they desperately need it, but, to become a legitimate asset class and to really get the support, it seems to me that what is, it's just going to be such a big selling point from them to say, oh yeah, by the way, you can liquidate your whole loans. That's fine. You can go and do that. Because right now that's, there are limited options obviously for institutional investors. So, and as you say, it's like, I think it'll take one. And then I certainly hope that we can make some movements here because it's not going to, I feel like it's going to hamper the real mainstream acceptance if you can't liquidate these things, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's if we want mass adoption, it is a check mark that a lot of investors just require, right? It's just, you've probably had lots of conversations with investors who are like, I love it, I think it's great, but until there's liquidity, I'm not going to take a deeper look.
Yep. So let's just talk about your client base, if you would, for a little bit. And how things are changing. You talk to Ron Suber, and he's always now talking about the movement towards like more passive investing and people just taking like a blanket spread across a variety of different loans based on risk. Now, with your clients, most of your clients still really, they're active investors cherry picking loans. I mean, where are you seeing more of that movement as well? I mean, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that it's a pretty obvious trend that people are in the space that a lot of the pools that investors have access to right now are passive. And I think that just shows that a lot of leverage right now is still with the platforms. Mm-hmm. I don't see many of the upcoming platforms being able to say, hey, we're earlier stage, but we're also going to be passive, right? That's just not really, that doesn't work for investors. And I think that, over time, the active strategy is preferable because, there's a lot of transparency, and there's feedback too. I think that one of the things that we miss is that now basically all loans that get listed get funded.
Right.
But if you go back a couple of years, that wasn't the case, and I think that actually, was a reason that the returns were higher back a couple of years ago, is because there was the wisdom of the crowd actually helping do that second due diligence process. And so we'll see. I mean, I think that like a pendulum, right? These things will swing back and forth, and I don't think active is dead, but I see a lot of momentum right now still behind passive.
Right. Well, they're also talking about the reduced alpha from active. I mean, it's been clear. I think just even for the average retail investor, it's the platforms are getting better at underwriting. It's harder to get alpha over the average. And is that something that you're seeing as well with your clients?
I think alpha in the space is just changing, right? When there was only one or two options to buy, you really had to justify your alpha in regards to the existing loans that you were buying against, right? And so it was alpha within a platform. And I think that a lot of the investors, especially the larger ones that are moving into this space, have a different view. Their alpha is which platforms they choose to work with and which credit grades they choose to buy.
Right.
And so it's just different, right? The end investors are looking for more diversified funds now, and they're not looking for just specialty funds that just buy Lending Club or just buy Prosper. There's definitely a trend towards, buying small business, right, and looking at all these new platforms around, that are doing these other asset classes like real estate or elective health.
Sure.
Private tuition, factoring, equipment leasing, right? The world of loan origination is very broad. And so I think that's really the future of alpha for investors is which platforms they decide to work with, and then which credit grades they buy within.
Right. Yeah, that's really good points. Really good points. So can you give us a sense of how of sort of the scope and the size of Orchard today? Like, I mean, can you tell me like roughly how many clients you have, roughly how much volume have you put through your platform?
Yeah, so the metric that we actually use to track is trading accounts, which means that the client is buying on like one platform. So if they're buying on Lending Club and Prosper and On Deck, that would be 3 trading accounts.
Right.
And and we're in kind of the high 50s in terms of trading accounts today, and that's been growing pretty steadily. And now that there's more and more options, it's kind of accelerating. In terms of capital deployed through our technology or orders placed on behalf of clients, we kind of went from 0 in January this year, and now have scaled up to the point we're doing hundreds of millions of dollars, which is amazing growth, and is a testament as well to how fast the originators are growing as well, because we're directly tied to their growth. If they have more product to sell, our investors are more than willing to buy it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the Lending Club IPO. We're recording this on December 5th, which is, there's all the talk this week has been about the IPO, which is supposed to happen next week. And I know that, you've chatted before and you said that you've been talking with a whole range of people about Lending Club, getting people up to speed, including you mentioned to me a while back, including some of the bigger banks. So I'm curious to hear about the conversations that you're having with these people. Is Lending Club on their radar? What are their thoughts about Lending Club?
Yeah. So just for perspective, I mean, the conversation 6 months ago, was very like hostile and dismissive, right? It was, just kind of a machine gun type questions on the space, followed by the end of the meeting being like, oh, well, they're never going to be a serious player, right?
Right.
So we don't need I'm glad we got all this information, but now we don't need to do anything. And I think that because Lending Club and On Deck and then, the others have announced their filing, it's a huge validation of the space, right? They can't ignore it anymore, right? And so it's just been interesting because it's obvious that at some of the large banks, there have been, directives that have come down saying, you need to have a strategy here, right? And people are scrambling to try to figure out what that strategy is going to be. And so I think it's a really interesting time to be in the space. And, I'm super excited for the next year. I think that, 2014 was the awareness grew and it was a coming out party for the space. And 2015 is going to be really exciting as all these players start to weigh in and make strategic moves.
For sure. So do you care to weigh in and make a prediction on what's going to happen next week as far as where we'll be, where will Lending Club open and close on their first day of trading, assuming obviously everything goes according to plan?
I wish I could, but I think for compliance reasons, I'm not allowed to invest in the IPO, and I'm not allowed to give any guidance on it. So.
Okay. Fair enough. So I got to let you go. Before I just want to ask about the future of Orchard and where you see your company going. What's the grand vision? Are you going to become like the Bloomberg of the lending space? I mean, what's the grand vision for you guys?
I think that comparing your vision to another company's is tough because obviously they had different circumstances to lead to their rise. I mean, I think our vision is to increase the capital velocity within the space and to do it in the way that we know best, which is through technology. And so any place where we can add value by building out tech products that multiple participants can use, right? It's almost being that that grease that helps everything run smoothly. And I want to see this space be massive, and our goal is to do everything we possibly can to make that a reality. And so, what we end up looking like in a couple years, I'm just as interested as you to find out. But right. I think that we're in an exciting space. It's growing quickly. We have a great team here at Orchard and have built some great products so far. And, looking forward on the roadmap, we have some amazing products coming out in the first half of next year that I'm really excited about. And so, we'll keep on building and trying to keep adding value through our skill sets and hopefully we'll make this into a huge asset class and look back, in future years and say, hey, we were here at the beginning, and that we made a positive impact on this space and built a better system than what existed before. Okay.
Well, that's a great note to end on. Thanks a lot, Matt. Appreciate your time and best of luck.
Thanks so much, Peter. Take care.
Okay. See ya. Yeah, I agree with Matt, and I think 2014 has been a great year, but really 2015 I think is certainly going to be the most exciting year ever. We will begin the new year presumably with 2 public companies in our space, and there will likely be more to come. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting developments. Some will obviously come from Orchard, others elsewhere. I think we're going to have, more awareness in the investing public into this asset class. And I frankly am very excited, just like Matt is, to see what develops. So on that note, I'm going to sign off. Thank you very much for listening, and I will catch you next time. Bye.